Hello, book friends.
Good morning. It literally is 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
We're on campus outside, so sorry if the audio sucks.
No. We're in beautiful nature, and can't you enjoy the beautiful sounds of the Hokkaido campus?
We rented a group room in the university library, but the fascists were like, "Nine, you have to have 3 people. We cannot let you into these empty rooms otherwise." Yeah.
Many empty study rooms, but they won't let us use them. So we're taking it to the streets basically today. We're taking it back to the roots, back to our, I don't know. We belong to the streets.
Okay. Great segue into The King in Yellow.
Exactly. The King in Yellow
is an 1895 book.
Yes.
By
his name is Robert William Chalmers, and he was from New York City, Brooklyn, baby.
Apparently this is like the only short story collection he ever published, and like the second only thing he ever published.
Oh no, he published like a shitload of books.
Oh, okay, my info is shit.
Something we should talk about, but basically the guy was he was born in 1865 in New York. He was an artist and a fairly successful painter, and then for no clear reason decided to start writing short stories and writing books, and basically dabbled in all different sorts of genres. He started out writing horror, supernatural horror, which is what this collection of short stories is. But that was really the early stage, and from then on he was writing soppy love stories and war history and stuff like that, but nothing. Yeah, and he actually had quite a lot of success in his life. He had a couple of bestsellers and stuff, loads of film adaptations. He's a really, really weird guy because we don't really know much about him.
Yeah, I mean the King in Yellow it's often mentioned in the same sentence as Lovecraft.
Yeah.
And all the eldritch monsters and stuff, which I think in retrospect I can see why, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think reading it, and I haven't read Lovecraft, by the way, but just from my image of what all this stuff is about.
So just so people are aware, Lovecraft and Chalmers lived in the same kind of period. I think Lovecraft was younger than Chalmers, but I think one of the reasons that they're connected is because Lovecraft published a collection of short stories from horror writers, and Chalmers was included in that.
And I think he praised Chalmers.
He did,
Chalmers, whatever.
He did praise him, but he also kind of shat on him a bit as well.
Yeah.
What did he say?
Some of the general criticism that I've seen, which I can agree with after reading this work, is that he has very good ideas that he then completely underdevelops and wastes.
Yes, yeah. So this is a H.P. Lovecraft quote. It says, "Chalmers is like Rupert Hughes and a few other fallen titans, equipped with the right brains and education, but wholly out of the habit of using them." And another guy writes...
It's like Mises speaking on Keynes.
Right.
Econ reference.
Yeah, the kind of sense is that this guy could have done so much better if he'd kind of tried harder, or if he'd kind of worked on his ideas more. And I think, I mean, I came into reading this expecting quite a lot, I think, and because it's often kind of considered, a classic of supernatural horror and stuff, and I was a little bit kind of disappointed.
Yeah.
A little bit kind of
Well, so there's 10 short stories, and only the first 4 of them have any horror elements whatsoever. And then the other 6, the fifth one is kind of on the edge, and then the last half it's just French people fucking each other. Literally that's literally what it is.
Really?
It's like French art students in Paris having the good life, It's all love drama and
pulp, basically, right?
Yeah, orgy societies.
Right.
And there's no real point to the stories.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know how they say one man's trash is another man's treasure?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of another man's treasure in the last half of this.
It's a very diplomatic way of putting it.
Yeah. No, but I do like the first half of the stories.
Yeah.
And there are some interesting ideas we'll get into.
So let's start talking about what exactly is the King in Yellow.
So the idea is, yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. So it's a fictional play, as in fictional. It doesn't exist, but it's referenced, as Phil said, like in the first 4 stories of this book, and it's like this weird drama about science fiction drama set in some like other world, and you kind of get glimpses of it throughout these 4 stories. But the main important thing about this book, The King in Yellow, this fictional story, is that the people that read it go insane in like various ways. So it's like banned by governments all around the world, and people are forbidden from reading it, but it kind of finds its way into people's lives, and there's this kind of irresistible quality to it as well. Like people who read a little bit of it end up wanting to read the whole thing.
So we have some themes here about forbidden knowledge. There is this word in Japanese, yugai tosho, which means like harmful books. Basically, it sounds kind of like fascist. Let's burn the books.
Yeah,
that's kind of what it is. But there have been some cases recently, I think in Osaka Prefecture, where there's some magazine like the Complete Manual of Suicide,
right,
and
right.
like the Mad Scientist.
That's
something.
right.
So basically, the prefecture banned the selling of those books to children, and then Amazon went like, well, this is too annoying to deal with, so we're just gonna not sell any of these books in Japan.
Yeah. The Manual of Suicide, that was super controversial when it came out.
So this is kind of a similar idea, right? Where we have this book that apparently if you read it, people go insane, or there's some harm done unto them, so you shouldn't read it. Or at least from Act 2 onward. Act 1 apparently is fine.
Yeah. But it's like Act 1 leads to Act 2.
Yeah.
Everyone who reads the first reads the second.
Don't smoke weed. It's an entry drug.
Act 1 is the gateway to Act 2.
Yeah.
No shit.
So there's 2 ways we can conceptualize the actual king figure here, the King in Yellow. The first one would be like a eldritch monster, like weird, I don't know, guy with a yellow coat, and like he will kill you. And then the second one would be Antifa is a concept, not an organization. Like
what?
According to FBI director, there is no to get away from this Lovecraftian tentacle monster idea, and more towards, the idea that writing or ideas, so to speak, can be, infectious and dangerous.
Right, yeah. So we see that in the first story, The Repair of Reputations, where the reading the book, or the book's influence, basically leads to an attempt to overthrow the American government. But the King in Yellow, I don't think is... it's not explicitly political or anything like that, and I think it is grounded much more in this idea of just losing your grip on reality, rather than it containing, specific ideas that are dangerous. But I think there's a lot of dimensions to it, in that sense as well.
Yeah, I mean, the elephant in the room would be to ask what actually is in Act 2.
Yeah.
What is this knowledge that is so... And obviously, if you answer that question, then the question doesn't make any sense, because it's this...
this is the connection with Lovecraft.
It's kind of the same plot device that we had in the Soviet book we read. Sorry, I forgot the zone. The
fucking
stalker inspiration.
Such idiots.
Alzheimer's. That one where the at the end there was this like alien device that if you like get it, it will give you eternal life or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, in the same way we have this thing that is undescribable by definition, and if you actually could explain what is in Act 2, you know, like there's obviously no such thing. Like someone would have written it already, or
Exactly.
You know, it would lose the effect.
And Roadside Picnic.
Roadside Picnic, yes, that's the one.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's the whole device is like, if you see it, then it loses its appeal, and it no longer has that kind of potential.
There's a lot of in all the 4 stories featuring the King in Yellow. There's a lot of ideas about predestination.
Mm-hmm.
So one interpretation could be that in Act 2 there is some kind of irrefutable proof that there is no free will.
Right.
So, you know, you basically read it and you go like, oh, whatever. For the first guy in the first story, it's like the dynasty, the American dynasty.
Yeah.
For later cases, it could be like, oh, I will die or whatever. You know, it's like you come to believe that there's like a predestined way things work, and there's nothing you can do about it.
That's an interesting way of thinking. So let's look at just a quick summary of the 4 books that we're looking at. So we have one the first one is called The Repairer of Reputations, which is, kind of a story about a guy who becomes increasingly paranoid and ends up believing he's like the next in line to kind of take over the United States in this strange, like, new monarchy revolution kind of thing, right?
We have a similar, like, conspiratorial group in Germany called Reichsbürger.
Ah, right.
Who are also like...
Yeah, go back to Weimar Germany.
Weimar Germany. There's like the imperial bloodline, and, you know, the current government is like a sham by the corporations, and we need to restore the... that kind of stuff.
The next story is called The Mask, and it's quite an interesting, like, mix between this sort of, like, Pride and Prejudice kind of, like, pleasant life of, like, the intelligentsia and this kind of strange horror story that is contained within it, about, like, science and preserving life and stuff like that. It's quite weird. I think maybe my favourite one. Third is called In the Court of the Dragon, which is a very short one about a guy who is being chased by a sinister guy from his church, an organist. And the final one is called The Yellow Sign.
I like that one.
This one was good. This is kind of it's a weird supernatural story about an artist being troubled by this night watchman outside his studio.
It has like the most cliche kind of horror story flow and ending, but I think this is like so pre all this cliche that this could be like, you know, it probably was quite revolutionary at the time. And honestly I think that's one of the things that's kind of seems to be missing about a lot of the writing about Chalmers, and I think is an interesting example of how, like, canon is made, where, I don't know, it's hard to say to what extent this guy was influential, because there doesn't seem to be a huge amount that was actually really written about him. Well, apparently in the first story, The Repair of Reputations, we get one of the first really, like, fiction instances of an unreliable narrator.
Right, okay.
Which wasn't a first-person unreliable narrator, which wasn't really a thing at the time, apparently.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
So we have the protagonist narrates his own story, but he feeds us bogus information, as we can infer from the things that other people say.
Yeah.
So, for example, he'll put on this crown, and he's like, I look so beautiful in my crown. And then his, like, cousin comes in, like, what you doing with that tin? Tin thing on your head, mate? Which is my American accent.
Yes. Jesus Christ. But yeah, no, this was, you know, very early, like, modernist literature, right? This is all about, like, you know, in my literature class, this Japanese literature class I'm taking, like, a lot of the conversation is about, like, modernist literature and writing about the self, and, like, discerning the self from everything else. Writing more about, like, things, confessionals, for example, and, like, things from first-person perspectives, which is interesting. And like you said, yeah, it is the last story, which is a confessional as well, which is I don't know. There's something to talk about there too. Anyway,
Yeah,
we should. Yeah, let's.
just the first story a bit.
Yeah.
Because it's probably the most like representative out of all the fours.
Mhm.
So
So
this is the only one that is kind of science fiction-y as well, right?
yes, so it is set in a future.
Yeah, I think we're like 30-ish years
Yeah.
in the future from when this. So we're in the like 1920s.
Yes,
in New York.
1920s. So we're in kind of a weird, I don't know.
Dystopian-ish.
Yeah, there's this kind of like, I don't know, sort of steampunk thing going on. I
Yeah.
don't know, it's kind of like,
So one of the interesting bits of information that we're given is that the government just implemented this new idea of suicide chambers
yeah,
because apparently shit is so bad that people just cannot anymore.
yeah,
And so the government is like, if you want to kill yourself, we provide some rooms where it's not exactly clear what goes on in there, but yeah, through some mechanism or other, you can kill yourself.
yeah. It's just very Futurama.
Hmm.
And also actually present day as well.
Zizek endorses.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of endorse it as well, honestly.
Okay.
So
But I can't diss Chairman Mao. Okay.
people should be free to kill themselves. I'm sorry.
Fair enough.
It doesn't make sense that it's illegal. It literally doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so the main character is just this kind of random guy. I don't know, do we know much about him?
He's racist,
Yeah.
which is probably why Lovecraft was like, oh yeah.
This guy's good.
Yeah. I forgot the exact line, but there's like one part where he was like, yeah, we have to get rid of all these lower races or something like that.
Jesus.
Which I think is like the insane protagonist speaking. I don't think this is
Right,
representative
right.
of Chambers.
Yeah, sure. So there is a mention of the book at the beginning, right?
Yeah, the actual. So we start out with a quote from.
Yeah. It's like I think some of the first lines of the book, right?
Yeah, of the King in Yellow,
Yeah.
of the fictional play.
Let me try and get that up now.
And one recurring. So there's a couple of recurring elements that we know about this play. One is that there's this creature, the King in Yellow, which is like an all-powerful-ish kind of being.
Hmm.
Another one is that the coming of the King in Yellow is sometimes announced by the yellow sign,
Yeah.
which is like a kind of prophetic symbol. We don't know exactly what it is. Another element is I forgot.
We have mention of the world Carcosa.
Yes,
Right.
sorry, yeah, that was it.
This is
So-
described in Carcosa. Strange is the night where black stars rise and strange moons circle through the skies. And there's various like descriptions of like the twin suns sinking behind the lake, shadows lengthening, blah blah blah. It's this really weird kind of like very still image of like this, like science fiction world.
And we really don't get a lot of that in any of these stories, but this is where you would get the idea of like a parallel universe from which we can like
Yeah,
colliding worlds, and then monsters come over or something like that, right?
yeah. The multiverse.
The Marvel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Marvel.
Restart podcast.
We should mention Marvel in every podcast. Anyway, so we learn about these suicide chambers, and then we learn that about the King in Yellow. So the character first introduces it, and he talks about reading it, and there's a really interesting description of him reading it, which I will read. So it says, during my convalescence, I had bought and read for the first time The King in Yellow. I remember after finishing the first act that it occurred to me that I had better stop. I started up and flung the book into the fireplace. The volume struck the barred gate and fell open on the hearth in the firelight. If I had not caught a glimpse of the opening words in the second act, I should never have finished it. But as I stooped to pick it up, my eyes became riveted to the open page, and with a cry of terror, or perhaps it was a joy so poignant that I suffered in every nerve, I snatched the thing out of the coals and crept, shaking, to my bedroom, where I read it and reread it, and wept and laughed and trembled with horror, at which times assails me yet. So this is, I don't know, going back to this idea of free will as well, like, I think this idea of this book coming to people and like presenting itself to people, in a way kind of similar to like the ring in Lord of the Rings, where it's just kind of it finds its way and it has its own will in a way.
And also like the videotape in The Ring.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Oh my god. These connections.
Where's Carcosa?
So yeah, then we have a description of this book being poison and laws prohibiting it, and everyone around the world kind of having this kind of bad reputation. What happens then?
Well, there's also this character, the name of the story, The Repairer of Reputations, which is like a old tiny goblin man who, and this is where the unreliable narrator thing comes in. So, according to literally everyone else, this guy is insane.
Yeah.
But according to the protagonist, he is like, he meets all these powerful people, and there's some like, he
has loads of money as well.
Yeah.
And loads of means of making money.
Like some conspiracy, like puppeteer kind of thing. He's like described as basically a professional blackmailer.
Yeah.
So, which I guess the Repair of Reputation is kind of an like sadistic way to phrase that. Like, let me repair your reputation, or I will repair it all over your face, like I did it with that one guy who I killed.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's a couple of murders involved. So the protagonist believes that his cousin, who is, by the way, very nice to him.
He's also a soldier, right?
Yeah, a soldier. He's about to get married, and he believes that his cousin is the next in line in this like American imperial throne hierarchy thing. And so he basically tries to kill him.
Yeah.
And the whole thing ends with him kind of succeeding, but also not. So he like gets in the way of the wedding.
Yeah.
But he does not kill his cousin, and then he's like taken away or something.
Yeah. So in the end, he's kind of like, he tries to foil the wedding. He tries to like insert himself, I guess. But when he fails, he's like, he's angry that his brother will take the throne, right? He's not angry that he's being taken away necessarily.
Yes.
He's more kind of angry that like, that his cousin's taking his place essentially, which speaks to his like delusion, right, about what's happening.
And the weirdest thing about this story to me was this Repair of Reputations guy, who is somehow involved in this conspiracy. He just gets killed by his cat, and then that's just it.
Oh yeah, he's got a pretty crazy cat.
What do you like? Half the story is about this cat. Like, what is going on? Do you have any interpretation here, or?
I mean, it if we're taking the reliable and unreliable narrator thing to its extreme, like the cat could be something completely different, right? The cat could be like, it could be one of these monsters from another world. It could be some kind of like manifestation of that, and this guy is just like so out of his mind that he doesn't recognize that. Or maybe it's the way that he tries to explain that to himself.
Oh, okay. You would go like the opposite. I would have said it's like some quote unquote harmless, everyday life thing that he like in his delusions sees as this weird cat. For example, the guy could be like I don't know, he could have like a drug problem.
Right.
So every time he finds him like collapsed in his room with like a scar from his cat, it's like he OD'd again or something.
Right. He says like, yeah, it's the cat. Nice.
Okay, so let me ask you, do you think... Oh, maybe I'll ask this at the end. Let's go to the next story.
Sure.
So the mask... we get this cool little intro sequence, which is, I think, the only quote we actually get from the proper, like, King in Yellow play. Aside from the Carcosa song or something?
Yeah. Yes, you're right. It's the only time where we get an actual excerpt from the play. So this story is called The Mask, and this is
featuring Jim Carrey.
I'll read Camilla, you read Stranger.
Okay, we're gonna make this Mendox. Okay.
You, sir, should unmask.
Indeed.
Indeed, it's time. We all have laid aside disguise, but you.
I wear no mask.
Brackett's terrified. Aside to Casilda. No mask? No mask!
This reminded me of a German comedy sketch by the comedian Vico von Bülow, who has since passed.
Yeah.
Was some shit in my face. There's lots of pollen flying around outside. Who like was active in the 70s in West Germany, and he has this sketch about a horror actor who always plays the monster in the movies, and like he's in an interview, and you know the pretty interview lady's like, you know, it's like really incredible how you always, you know, make these monsters seem so creepy and like
right.
And the guy is hideous, right? And so at the end she's like, but just this once for this interview, won't you take off the mask for us? And he's like, what mask? and she has this horror look, and I feel like, oh.
Very nice.
But yeah, okay. So this is kind of frustrating about this story, though. We get this cool intro, and then there's literally no mask in the. Okay, we can debate that, but there's no like physical mask.
No.
There's no like, it locks on your face and you get possessed kind of, you know.
That would be too satisfying. So to sum up the story again, maybe a little bit more detail. The story is about these three characters.
Love triangle.
Yeah, there's a love triangle going on. And so there's two guys and a girl, and one of the guys is the narrator. They're describing this like, he's describing like visiting his friend, this guy who's a sculptor, and has found this new way of like preserving real life things and making them into sculptures. He's made this chemistry like liquid shit.
Yeah, he invented like a new periodic table element.
Essentially, yeah. And it's kind of like dry ice. The kind of way you put something in and it comes out and it's completely frozen, but it has this kind of like marble quality to it. And so he's like super psyched about that. And there's this girl who this sculptor is marrying, but the protagonist also kind of likes her as well, and she also likes him. And yeah,
she's like, I'm gonna marry the sculpture guy, and the protagonist is like, okay, I'm cool with that. You guys be happy.
He's sort of, but inside, you know, when he goes home, he's like talking about, he's like tormented by this whole thing.
Is it, what's her name? Genevieve?
Genevieve, yeah. He's tormented by this situation. But when he meets them, he is like cordial and they have a good time. And then
basically, good old Jen is not happy with her marriage. This was at least my interpretation, and she like plunges herself in the liquid.
Yeah.
And so she becomes a statue. And then the guy, which we actually don't find out right away.
This is Boris, his name.
Yeah, Boris. Boris shoots himself. And the protagonist doesn't know this for quite a while. He's like in shock. And then his doctor Alex, I think.
It's his friend.
Or his friend,
his,
yeah.
like, roommate.
He tells him this like later, years later.
Yeah.
Because the protagonist went to like travel the world or something.
Yeah.
And so he comes back.
He gets given the estate.
Yeah, by Boris.
By Boris.
Boris's will. And he does he like kiss the statue as well, or is that like anyway,
I'm not
she
sure
like
if that's significant.
she like unpetrifies.
Yes, it happens basically like automatically. So they
Yeah.
find out basically at the end that there's quite a cool sequence at the end where slowly they start discovering these things which were previously frozen alive again.
Yeah, the rabbit is
The
gone
rabbit,
or something.
Yeah, the goldfish, the rose, and then the story ends with, I think, like her opening, like the door opening and her standing there or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is an unusual ending for a horror story.
Yeah, this one's not really that horror.
No, I suppose not. It is creepy though. It's a bit weird.
It's like it's a romance, most of all. Anything.
But so one of the things that's interesting in this story is and all of these stories really, except for the first one, I think, is how the King in Yellow is like introduced, and it's very candidly. It comes in very candidly in the kind of the middle of the story, where the character the protagonist, he like retreats to one of these, like the smoking room, and he picks a book off the shelf, I think, and just has like a glance through it, and we're informed that he shouldn't be reading this book, but we don't know if he knows any better. And I think that's one thing that makes this more than just a simple like romance story, right? And I think it's a really interesting device. Like, we have this prior knowledge about what this thing is because of this anthology, and it's then like slowly, really like discreetly introduced.
But we get kind of a happy ending to the story, which throws me off a bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the thing that's like most unsatisfying about it. We never really know what the King in Yellow. We never really feel the full effect of what it does, I think, in some of these stories.
Yeah.
When this guy reads the book, he kind of goes a bit. I think this is at the point where he kind of develops this idea of like the mask, where he goes home and he takes this mask off and he's tormented by this love triangle that's persisting, and the fact that he can't have this girl.
Right. So the mask is like a metaphor for him having to pretend to be happy for his friend, but in reality he's in love with the woman, of course.
And he describes it as getting to the point where he's like, it's almost like natural, and it feels like a genuine expression of himself when he's with them. But he just can't reconcile how when he comes home and it's night that he feels this way, like a completely different way, right?
I mean, the way it's presented in this story, it's a nice concept, but I generally I really don't like the. You know, you have all these sociologists, especially on the more like, I guess, postmodern front as well, where, you know, it's all like, we're all just actors in society. We all have performative roles that we embody, and there is no real self. And, you know, we have to assume these masks and roles in societies. And, you know, and then, you know, if you want to connect that to like more advanced feminist theory and so on, it goes to the kind of rejection of, you know, certain biological ideas and towards a full embracing of social constructionism, which is obviously not in this story, but like, yeah, this idea of the mask, the social mask, the performative role in society, I wonder how much discussed it was at the time, but I certainly think that today it's like a completely like just trampled idea that like every fucking, I think Nietzsche is a nihilist teenager. It's like, oh, these performative masks in society.
Right.
It's, I don't know. That was kind of
that
kind of ruined it a bit for me.
I can see what you're saying. Like, and also, yeah. I mean, this guy is. I mean, maybe this is part of what the King in Yellow is, right? Like, maybe it's this delusion that like when you're actually experiencing joy with your friends, that actually it's only possible because of this quote unquote mask. Whereas in reality, it's you're genuinely experiencing joy with your friends, you know. So like the way I feel like he describes it in this book is that in this short story is that it's almost described like it's a sickness, the fact that he's so able to like competently have a good time with his friends. When it's really like maybe you are just actually having a good time with your friends.
Right. And
it's not you're not like adopting a role where it's like I am the role where I'm having a good time with friends.
And also, yeah, I didn't really like this one, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough.
For a couple of reasons. I think one of the biggest thing that kind of bothered me as well is that we have this view from the protagonist who is tormented by the mask, and like somehow he is like the victim in the story. But what about Boris? What about the guy who like married a woman who was like mentally unfaithful to him to the degree that she killed herself, and then he was so depressed that he killed himself?
Mentally unfaithful to him.
Well, it's not like she cheated, but she wanted to cheat so bad that she killed herself.
Right.
Basically.
Oh, I see what you're
like,
saying.
You know. I don't know. Okay, the mask. Then the dragon one. I don't have a lot to say about this one.
The dragon one is quite a short story. It's like one of the shortest ones, I think, in the Court of the Dragon.
A lot of church elements, a lot of like Catholic.
And the first words literally are in the church. So we have a guy who is he's sitting down at mass by himself, and he is like watching the whole like service go ahead, and then he's shot a glance by the organist, like this really, really horrible, like really, he's described as like a really mean stare, and he's really, really troubled by it because as far as he knows, he doesn't even know the person, doesn't even know the guy, and he definitely hasn't done anything to provoke that. And he's so troubled by it that he leaves the church, walks down the street, but behind him he sees the guy following him, and he like walks past him, brushes past him, and there's this kind of like this scene where he's like walking through Paris and sort of avoiding him, and then eventually he kind of runs away and finds himself at this like cafe. From there he's like, okay, I'm safe, I haven't seen this guy in a while. And he walks home to his like little like courtyard community place, and when he's climbing the stairs to his apartment, he turns around and he sees the guy again, and the guy is staring straight at him, and he walks directly towards him. And then some weird shit happens. He like walks up to him, and then the protagonist suddenly finds himself in the world of the King in Yellow, right?
Yes. Sorry, there's like a bee on me. Nature, everybody. This is the real horror. Yeah.
So or rather, what happens? It's a small bee. It's not going to sting you.
It's nice to say when you don't have allergies.
Are you allergic to bees?
I don't know if it's bees or wasps, but yeah, I get fucked
really?
up if I get stung. Go on.
So, hang on a sec. In fact, no, he doesn't. So he doesn't get transported immediately. What happens is he meets this guy. Phil is literally running away from this bee. He gets confronted by this guy, and then slowly, like, it becomes clear that he was just sleeping.
Oh my god, the bees won't leave me.
Throw your jacket on him. I don't think I can do this.
Just do a little cut.
Um,
It just won't go.
Alright, we'll take a short break.
Boys. Book boys.
B-boys.
Bee boys. Alright, we've survived the bee attack.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't fucking go. Maybe it was the yellow sign.
So, where were we? We were talking about the
The guy in the church.
yeah, in the Court of the Dragon. So, he gets confronted by this creepy guy, and then he finds himself waking up again in the church.
And he thinks it was a dream,
Yeah, he's like, oh, I was sleeping.
but it wasn't.
No, it wasn't a dream. So he gets these, disapproving glances from the other people in the church, and he's like, oh shit, I was sleeping. But then, when he leaves, he's like, he basically gets like transported to this different place, this different world, and he starts describing these elements of the world from The King is Yellow. So this like lake called the Lake
The
of
king
Hail.
is yellow.
Huh?
The king is yellow.
What? Is that what I said?
Yeah.
The King in Yellow. And so he says, I crept to the door, the organ broke out overhead with a blare. A dazzling light filled the church, blotting the altar from my eyes. The people faded away, the arches, the vaulted roof vanished. I raised my seared eyes to the fathomless glare, and I saw the black stars hanging in the heavens, and the wet winds from the Lake of Hail chilled my face. And now, far away, over leagues of tossing cloud waves, I saw the moon dripping with spray, and beyond, the towers of Carcosa rose behind the moon. And we also get the first, clear mention of the King in Yellow as an actual character.
Yeah, so the ending to this one is probably the most horror ending to any of the stories.
Yeah. So he says, death and the awful abode of lost souls, whither my weakness long ago had sent him, had changed him for every other eye but mine. And now I heard his voice, rising, swelling, thundering through the flaring light. And as I fell, the radiance increasing, poured over me in waves of flame. Then I sank into the depths, and I heard the King in Yellow whispering to my soul, it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of a living god.
Yeah, so
Spooky.
all of these stories give us a different missing piece to the idea of the King in Yellow and what it is. This is the only one where we actually kind of meet the actual King in Yellow creature or whoever is speaking this to him, right?
Yeah.
And this story, out of all of them, supports this idea of eldritch monsters the most, right?
Yeah.
Where there's an actual entity being like, oh, I'm gonna fuck you up.
So, yeah, it's also worth mentioning that, the King in Yellow is also attributed to one of Lovecraft's monsters. I think it might even be, I can't remember who it was actually, but the King in Yellow also, as a character, actually predates Chalmers.
Really?
So there was a short story by another author who mentions, I think, who mentions this, who uses the same character. I thought this was kind of interesting because I feel like we see this trope in horror, this idea in horror a lot, even today, of these characters that they're kind of not viral, but they have a kind of public ownership in a way. They're taken and they're adapted by lots of different people. So one I think really prominent example today is, do you know SCP?
I think yes.
Secure, contain,
Yeah,
protect, right?
yeah.
It's this online, basically like public, like collaborative fiction project.
Yeah.
People talk about this like organization which tries to protect tries to contain these like crazy like monsters and strange like beings and whatever. And there are loads of stories around that. I think one of them is the back rooms, which is, I think that's one of like the most kind of popular of the SCP, and maybe Slenderman.
Yeah, I think actually if you pull up the King in Yellow of Wikipedia, it's gonna mention some SCP.
Really?
Which is, you know, I don't know. It seems like the Wikipedia was clearly, like whoever wrote it is definitely in this like,
Yeah.
community of these horror games. Or something. I did a quick Google on King in Yellow. I think it was the Wikipedia, but somewhere it like immediately links to SCP.
Right. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see that as an example, though, right? Like even in early days of horror, like in the early days of modern horror writing, like how characters were kind of borrowed maybe and adapted. So let's go on to the last one.
The Yellow Sign. This is my favorite one.
I did like this.
It has like the most satisfactory pacing, I would say. They're all beautifully written.
Yes.
Even the latter stories, which are not horror at all.
I thought the fifth story was actually maybe the most, like in terms of how like the craft and like how well the things were described. I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the
Mask, for example, is paced very, very badly.
Right. So I think they're all beautifully written, but a lot of them are very oddly paced. This one, the fourth one, the Yellow Sign, it is very satisfying in the way it's built up and ends as well.
Yeah.
So
this is a confession. It starts out with a preface, I guess, saying, being the contents of an unsigned letter sent to the author. So, we're supposed to interpret this as a letter being sent to maybe Chalmers himself. And we have this confession from an artist who is working I think it's in New York. There's mention of like Broadway and Washington Square. And the first thing that we encounter is he's looking out the window, right?
Yes.
And he sees this guy outside his studio who like just makes him feel very uncomfortable. He's like described as
well, before that, just to set the scene a bit. So there's this romance story, right? There's this guy, he paints this model regularly. She's a lot younger, she's very innocent.
This happens before all of that.
Does
it?
Yeah.
One of the very first things that happens is he's looking out the window and he sees this guy, and he's so freaked out. Not freaked out. He's sick. He's like disgusted by him. That when he goes back to painting his painting, he ends up completely fucking up the painting and making it look terrible.
Okay, true.
That's how we're introduced to him as an artist and his muse, who is called Tessie.
Tessie, yeah. So he always paints Tessie, but yes, he saw this guy and now he keeps fucking up the painting. He like paints this disgusting greenish color on her, like subconsciously without and then he notices like, I did it again, and she's like, why do you paint me so ugly today? Are you angry with me? And yeah, they clearly like each other, but there's like morals and shit in the way.
And he also says that he's known her since she was a child. But then he explains, like, he says, she says to him, actually, everything went wrong from the time you came back from the window and talked about that horrid looking man you saw in the churchyard.
Right.
He says, yes, he probably bewitched the picture.
And this is like a very, just the way it's described, this is already really creepy. Like more so than any of the other stories, I think, where it's like you see this creepy gardener figure or whatever he is in the
Yeah.
churchyard, who's just like hideous, and he's looking at you.
Yeah, he's also described in a really interesting way as he's described as like looking soft, which is like a really weird description for like something that we think is creepy, and you know, it's not like some gangly like goblin guy.
Yeah.
He looks soft and like pale, and you're like, what the fuck is that? Like, the description is very like sparse when we talk about the guy. Like they use the word soft a lot. You know, it's like really contained to these like specific words. We don't know a lot about what he looks like. We just know he's like this like Play-Doh man.
And I think also the reason why... Oh, okay, before I say that, let's go a bit on with the contents. So
Yeah.
the girl has a dream
Yes.
about... Well, we don't know that it's the guy in the garden at first. She just says she has this creepy dream
Yeah.
where someone takes her away or something like that.
It's I think it's not that she's being taken away, but she's at least not being like kidnapped,
Yeah.
but she's being like picked up by this like black car, and in the back is the protagonist in a coffin,
Ah, yes.
right?
yes.
And the driver is the creepy man, the creepy Play-Doh guy.
Yeah. We don't know this yet, but then she like looks out the window as well or something, or she on her way there or something, she sees him
Yeah.
and she's like shocked. She comes back from the window and she's like, "That's the guy.
Yeah.
That's literally the guy in my dream." And the protagonist is like, "No, you're insane. You're just
He says,
neurotic."
"Have you been eating Welsh rarebit or lobster salad?"
Yes. So
Man, he pulls his punches.
And I think the reason why this is so creepy is because we have this innocent girl character at risk here now. If this was just the painter guy in his home, often we think like, I don't know, it's scarier if you're alone or whatever. I don't think that's true. If this was just the painter guy and there was this creepy figure outside his room and he would see him in his dreams, it's kind of like, whatever, it's this old man, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, if there's someone threatening you, like, just go down and talk to him.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I'd beat him in the face or something. But now we have this innocent girl involved, and we have, on the one hand, we have this like this kind of love story
Yes.
between them,
yeah.
and now it gets threatened by this horror element.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is like, this like horror. There's nothing sexual about it at this point, really.
No.
But there's something disgusting about like a third element of this creepy old man invading this
And
innocent space. Right?
it's not even that he's necessarily dangerous, but you just you don't quite know what he is, and
Yeah.
the fact that he's like, so they're painting, right? They're trying to create something that's beautiful with these materials, and they see this guy who is seemingly made out of some similar kind of material, right? He's like made. He looks like he's made, maybe, or he looks like he's like not quite human, like a representation of a human, like a kind of like clay model or something. But he's disgusting, disgusting to look at, and that kind of threatening this world. But the fact that she is his, like, the object of his desire. He's in love with this girl, and he confesses this love to her in the story, right? And I think they basically get together in the middle of this story.
They do. And okay, one key element is also the protagonist also has a dream where I think it's a dream where he talks to the guy, or the guy outside. He like whispers something to him, which at the time of the dream we don't really know what he says yet.
Right.
And he gets really angry. He wants to punch him. Okay, fast forward a bit.
So we have we meet a a little whippersnapper called Thomas, who has the funniest written in accent. He's the bellboy of the building, I guess. So this is, I think, the next morning after all this stuff went down, and Thomas is talking about the night watchman. So the protagonist is asking him about the guy, and he's saying, Thomas sniffed. That there worm, sir, he's night watchman of the church, sir. He makes me tired of sitting out all night on them steps and looking at you insulting like. I'd punched his head in, sir. Beg pardon, sir. This is kind of really. It's like so. The way that the like his accent is written in is fucking ridiculous. Anyway, what does Thomas do? Thomas describes having like a run-in with this guy, and I think there's a similar thing where like the guy is like he like scares the people when they walk past, and he says something to him, and then the guy, he grabs Thomas, and he says, he grabbed me wrist, sir, and when I twisted his soft mushy fist, one of his fingers come off in me hand.
Right.
And when the protagonist looks out the window, he's horrified because he sees the guy and the middle finger of his right hand is missing. So we also have this like new image of, you know, it's not just this guy's like view of this creepy dude is confirmed with Thomas.
Now we have like a real supernatural element to this character, right? Like,
yeah.
He seems unreal.
Yeah.
Okay, fast forward a bit. Tessie, you know, they're like in their like initial love story phase, and she gives the main guy like a token of good luck.
Yes.
Or so she believes, which is like is it a letter? A like golden or yellow letter?
It's like a
chain,
medallion kind of.
A medallion.
Not like a. What's the word? Something that hangs off a necklace.
Yeah, and it's yellow.
It's got and this unreadable character written in it.
And she's like, oh, I found this on the night that I had that terrible dream. So I decided to give you this cursed item.
Yeah, she's like, I couldn't find the owner even though I asked around everywhere. So, but it's yours now.
And then, then things accelerate. So she like runs off and reads The King in Yellow.
Yeah.
And then
I think there's like a restless night and he's trying to find something to read or something, right? He comes across it and then she gets interested in it and then she takes it from him and then runs away and reads it.
And then she's like, you know, after she read Act 2, she's like, oh, crazy knowledge. She's like fucking out of her mind, like on a basically drugged out kind of.
Yes.
And then he's like, now I have to read it as well.
Yeah.
And then they read it and they're like this. They're described as discussing it for hours.
Yeah.
Like, bro, did you see The Matrix? You have to see The Matrix.
I mean,
Let's talk about The Matrix for like 5 hours.
This is like one of the clearest kind of like analogies with drugs, I think. Because it's like, I mean, there's the you know, this guy, he says that he's read the first act before, but he didn't read the second act. So he's kind of like this, almost like an experienced user who like understands the danger of it enough to be like, okay, I haven't read the second act.
True.
And then the naive Tessie comes along and she's really excited by it and she takes it and runs away with it and then, you know, does the whole thing, then passes out afterwards because of the experience. And then he's like, oh, fuck it, I'll do it as well. But then the discussing it after I thought was kind of interesting because it's like those like collective experiences on drugs where you're like channeled into a similar kind of like, I don't know, mind state or something.
Yeah, if you wanted to find like a real life element, like a simile kind of for The King in Yellow, I think drugs makes the most sense.
Yeah, something like meth or, you know, like really destructive drug.
So
what happens then? Yeah, he leaves, right?
Yeah, we find out. How do we find out? I forgot. But we find out what the guy whispered to him in his dream.
Yeah. Well, no, because what happens is he walked out, right? He leaves his apartment and oh, actually, does he? Hang on a second.
Now I'm confused.
Maybe I'm wrong. He just. It's described here that he just. He's like trying to sleep, and he's getting these. He's hearing the voice in his head.
Yeah.
And suddenly he comes to understand it, and the words are, "Have you found the yellow sign? Have you found the yellow sign? Have you found the yellow sign?"
Yeah, it's repeated like over and over. And I listened to this one actually. So I have this night shift job in like an abandoned office building, basically.
Jesus.
I know. And I was listening to the audio version of this story on like my night shift. It was the best. It was so cool.
That's disgusting.
And the voice acting was really good, and like, you know, it just like this was like the most horror out of all the stories, where it's like revealed what the creepy guy said to him.
Yeah.
Because she obviously gave him the yellow sign.
Yeah.
And then we get this like, oh, but it was all predetermined. Like what did the guy whisper to me? I remember he said, "Did you find the yellow sign? Did you find the yellow sign?
Oh,
Did you find the yellow sign? Did you find the yellow sign?" And I was like, oh no. Yeah, I like that. Well, and then, yeah, he goes crazy and he has to write down all this, and then we get taken back to the beginning of the story, where it's like, okay, so this is the confession, right? He's writing this as we speak, as we read it.
And then, the way that the story ends is that he sees this like shadowy figure coming to the house, which we learn is the Play-Doh man. And he comes into the house and
Play-Doh man.
He comes into the house and they like have a brawl, but I don't know what happens to. Oh yeah, Tessie gets killed by him. I'll just read this bit because it's quite so it's quite cool how it kind of comes together. So the house was very silent, and not a sound from the misty streets broke the silence. Tessie lay among the cushions, her face a grey blot in the gloom, but her hands were clasped in mine, and I knew that she knew and read my thoughts as I read hers, for we had understood the mystery of the Hyades, and the phantom of the truth was laid. Then, as we answered each other swiftly, silently, a thought on thought, the shadows stirred in the gloom about us, and far in the distant streets we heard a sound. Nearer and nearer it came, the dull crunching of wheels. Nearer and yet nearer, and now, outside, before the door it ceased, and I dragged myself to the window and saw a black-plumed hearse. The gate below opened and shut, and I crept shaking to my door and bolted it, but I knew not bolts, no locks could keep that creature out who was coming for the yellow sign. And now I heard him moving very softly along the hall. Now he was at the door, and the bolts rotted at his touch. Now he entered, with eyes staring from my head. I peered into the darkness, but when he came into the room I did not see him. It was only when I felt him envelop me in his cold, soft grasp that I cried out and struggled with deadly fury, but my hands were useless, and he tore the onyx clasp from my coat and struck me full in the face. Then, as I fell, I heard Tessie's soft cry, and her spirit fled to God, and even while falling I longed to follow her, for I knew that the king in yellow had opened his tattered mantle, and there was only Christ to cry to now. And then from then it goes, I could tell more, but I cannot see what help it will be to the world. As for me, I am past human help or hope. As I lie here, writing, careless even whether or not I die before I finish, I can see the doctor gathering up his powders and vials with a vague gesture to the good priest behind me, which I understand. So now, we get this, indication that he's in the present, after the fact, surrounded by doctors and a priest. And we learn that, Tessie died and when they found the protagonist, they found one living and 2 dead. The living one was the protagonist. One dead was Tessie, and the other dead was, quote, a horrible decomposed heap on the floor. To which the who is the watchman of the church, and they said, "I have no theory, no explanation. That man must have been dead for months." Very creepy.
Very creepy. I like this one a lot.
Yeah, it ends there, which is like quite a good place to finish.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that the pacing is probably the cleanest of them all. Yeah, and it is satisfactorily creepy. Cool.
Good. Okay, short note maybe on the last other stories, just to sum it all up, without really going through them, and then we can make some general takes on the book. So then the 5th story is like this, whatever, guy goes to the forest, there's like a lot of falconing talk.
He comes across these falconers.
Yeah, I don't really want to explain the whole story.
Yeah.
It's not super related to the King in Yellow, but the kind of ending reveal is that he wakes up and it's like all this thing that he thought, he met this woman and they fell in love and shit, but he just wakes up and he sees this gravestone where it's her name, but she died like 500 years ago.
Yeah, and there's a mention of him as well on the gravestone.
Yes.
So he like somehow finds himself traveling and going into the past and having this experience with this woman.
That's like
I really liked that story actually. I thought it was quite good. I think the description, like his like description of the world in the beginning was really, really, really beautiful, and it was pretty pithy. Like it was quite. It didn't make sense why they fell in love.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like the Pride and Prejudice, like.
Yeah.
Floaty Wonderland thing, and then at the end there was this sharp contrast with like now he's back and he's like lived his whole life. But
so I get in horror there's often this like inevitable monster coming towards you to fuck you up, and I get that it's like inevitable, so you can't really do anything. I think in this one it was done poorly with the snake. So there's which just kind of annoys me. So there's this scene where they're out together and there's like a snake approaching them, and it's like they're like talking in real time, like, oh no, here comes the snake, 1 meter at a time. It's
the really dangerous viper that will kill you.
Gonna kill us, and then the snake like bites them, and only after the snake puts the poison into them, he's like, okay, now that we're basically dead, I'm gonna kill the snake.
It doesn't kill her, it only kills him.
Oh yeah.
He's like, yeah, now I've gotten bitten, I'm gonna stomp on the snake. I don't know, I thought it kind of fit in how weird and dreamy the world was.
Sure, I get it's like the inevitable death coming toward you, but I like when it's done in a way where I can like put myself in the situation without being frustrated.
Fair enough.
Anyway, so and then the last 5 stories are all like French artists fucking each other, like literally. There's some cool stuff with like war in Prussia. There's like bombshells raining, some cool descriptions of the town.
Yeah.
But yeah, and none of them are horror stories at all. At all, Yeah, I don't know why they're lumped in together in this collection.
Yeah, most people don't seem to really know why they're connected.
And the 5th story, the only connection to the King in Yellow is that one of the falconers at the mansion is named Pasteur.
Right. Okay.
Which is apparently, I forgot. It's either mentioned somewhere in Lovecraft, or it's like a place, like there's Carcosa. Yeah. And then there's Pasteur or something.
Oh, okay.
But that's the only thing, and it's not really, it doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, it's not considered a King in Yellow story.
Right. Okay. So, summing up some of the concepts, reflecting on these ideas, do you think what do you think about this idea of the forbidden knowledge? So that, there's something that if you knew it, it would corrupt you to the degree of insanity.
Yeah, it's something that's purely destructive. I mean, I think it's very difficult to draw like a real world analogy, because I think, maybe, I mean, it depends. I'm not sure if there's anything that's like so corrupting that it can't be like defeated. If we're talking about like, ideas that are like dangerous and harmful, it's difficult to say whether like there are really any true ideas that are just poison, and that like a kind of can't be reasoned with and will infect you. So maybe, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I think more so than ideas, it's more like knowledge, like some piece of information that like it's just too terrible to know. And I think, we have a lot of religious imagery, a lot of church imagery here.
Yeah.
And I think in some way, if you read a religious text and you were like convinced of its truth, that's kind of an experience like that, right?
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Obviously, there's no such text that could like
uniformly convince everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Uniformly convince everyone, but to the right person at the right time. If you were convinced that this like certain religious worldview is true, and that yes, we are all destined to go to purgatory or like whatever it is, that could definitely corrupt someone, or the opposite, right? Yeah.
And I think I mean, we're in Japan, so the discussion of like cults is quite relevant, right?
Yeah.
I had a class about cults. It was mainly about like how religious freedom and cult activity relates. But the main thing that our professor like was quite insistent on is like, don't approach these cults. Like, even if you really want to get like an insight, like as like a undergrad student, like you've got to be really, really careful of these things. If you get approached by a cult, he was basically saying like, just don't engage and don't like.
Right. So there is a kind of nonsensical duality in that, which on the one hand is like, these cults are obviously bogus. They're nonsensical. Like we're laughing at them. We're making fun of them. Look at these silly people. But on the other hand, these ideas are so dangerous that even if you're a reasonable person, you could get infected by the ideas. Don't even think about it. Right.
Yeah.
That's a strange dynamic.
It is because it's I think it's also important that I don't know, I think one of the things that is quite a big theme of our whole thing is that the reason we're reading a lot of these like quote unquote like source materials is because they are the things that give a clear idea of like what people are thinking when someone produces like an idea. You can read the spark notes and that can be really helpful in understanding, but it's also really effective to read the source yourself and like come to your own kind of understanding of what it is. But there is that question of like when it's like individual capability of like reasoning through these ideas, and also maybe the idea that there are things that actually can't really be reasoned through. When I think about like the myth of Sisyphus, or like this philosophy of like suicide, like I don't know if I can actually really reason through it. And when we were discussing that book, like around that time, it was, I don't know, it kind of got into my life. It kind of bled into my daily life, like more than I kind of anticipated. So I found myself thinking about it more and more, and I don't think it was necessarily helpful. I think I kind of got to the point where it was like, we can ruminate on things like suicide and like try and think like, what is the reason to live? But it's not like a question that you can really reason yourself through, you know.
And I don't think it's an accident that we get the suicide chambers mentioned in the first story.
Yeah.
Because really, I guess nihilism is kind of like, you know, it is kind of the forbidden knowledge in a way.
Yes,
right.
right.
So, you know, if you really come to the understanding that life is meaningless,
Yeah.
or through whatever view, whether it's like, look at all these infinite possibilities in the universe, nothing matters.
Right.
Or if it's like, oh, there's eldritch gods who are controlling this world and we have no agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of corrupting. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and then, you know, connecting that to inevitable insanity or suicide.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw one interpretation online that was like saying that the King in Yellow play could be seen as like a parallel to totalitarian ideology. That the way it corrupts people, especially pretty much limited to the first story, because now we have this like small group of people who think they're going to overthrow the government and they're going to like,
sure.
you know, erect the real imperial system.
I think
That definition or that interpretation definitely doesn't hold up across the other stories.
No, it doesn't. And but I think that's also, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's not a way that it would manifest, though, right?
Yeah.
If you think about something that's like supernaturally corrupting, or like it goes beyond like politics to the fabric of our being. I don't know. It would make sense that it would manifest in something like politics as well, on like political systems and stuff. But yeah, no, it definitely is not about. It's not a very political book. This like these stories aren't super connected to politics, I don't think.
Another interpretation is that it's not really the King in Yellow, but the writer who is the real monster.
The writer of the King in Yellow.
Yeah.
Right.
Or in this case, it could be Chambers.
Yeah.
So there's, I think it's by Goethe. There's a German story called The Sorrows of Young Werther, Die Leiden des jungen Werther.
Okay.
Which is kind of an infamous tragic love story in German literature, where it's really sad. There's bad ending.
Oh, I think I've heard about this.
Yeah,
I think you talked about this the other day. Yeah.
We should read it at some point. But
cool.
Basically, at the time, you know, the story was considered so sad that a lot of young people who read it apparently committed suicide after reading it.
Yeah.
Which was then titled the Werther effect, the Werther effect, so that you know, kind of like the King in Yellow. If you read it, you get corrupted, or you get so depressed that you kill yourself.
Yeah.
Which is like the most real life parallel to an actual King in Yellow I could think of.
There's also a Japanese movie from the early 2000s called Jisatsu Sakuru. Like suicide circle. And it's about this kind of like corrupting. It's like transferred through mobile phones. Basically, a bunch of high school students. In the beginning of the film, they all jump in front of a train, like all holding hands. They jump in front of a train, and it's about this like viral, like SMS message or something, or like email chain that like forces people to commit suicide. And now I actually mention it, it reminds me of when I was younger, when I was like maybe like 11 or 12, like just starting high school. We everyone uses like emails and like MSN to like message and shit. And so you had like all your friends' emails, and like you would always get these like fucking
chain mails,
yeah, which is like, if you don't forward this to 100 people, Mickey Mouse will appear in your bedroom and cut your throat or some shit.
Wow, we've really gone deep on this one.
No, but I mean, experientially, when I read that shit when I was younger, I was like, the first time I got one of these emails, I was fucking terrified. I was like, so like, I don't know, disturbed by it. in a way, I don't know. It's kind of like, it's not like, I don't know, the power of like reading things and like having these existential reactions to them. I think maybe like The King in Yellow is kind of provides a similar kind of like thrill or like feeling when you read it. Maybe it's like, oh shit, Mickey Mouse is real and he's gonna fucking slit my throat.
Yeah.
What did you generally think about these books? Let's talk about just like general thoughts and like how much did you like it? What could be better?
There is definitely, as you also mentioned at the beginning, a expectation versus reality break here, where you think, you're reading this influential horror thing, and then it's, again, it's not badly written, but it's, it's not exactly probably what people are looking for when they think they're going to read horror, right?
Yeah. I found it personally quite hard to place.
Same.
Like it didn't.
It's not gonna rank among like my favorite readings that I've read recently,
no.
but it's not bad. If you want to read it, definitely read the first and the fourth story, Repair of Reputations, and the Yellow Sign, I'd say, or just read the first four. They're short.
Yeah.
You don't really have to bother with the rest.
I think one of the difficulties about like what we've read so far is there doesn't seem to be any like coherent style to like mention about this guy. Like even The King in Yellow itself appears in very different ways, and the effect of it is not really that obvious. It's described as a book when you read about this book online or wherever. It's described as a book that corrupts people and drives them crazy, but actually, like, it's kind of not clear that it's the book that's doing that in a lot of these stories, right?
Yeah.
Like in The Mask, it's like, is the book, is that what is causing all this strife?
Yeah, probably not, right?
Even the last book as well, like, I'm pretty sure it's the Play-Doh guy that's causing the strife. But again, if we're talking about predestination...
Even in the first one, the protagonist, seemingly, according to the people around him, kind of gone insane. He was committed to a mental institution once before.
Yeah.
After he fell off his horse a couple years back.
Right.
So there always seems to be some actual reason, and then it kind of gets blamed on The King in Yellow.
What I do really like about this, I think The Mask and even the fifth story, is the inversion of these very like classic styles of writing or like classic themes and like. The Mask is about this love triangle, and it's like I said, like Pride and Prejudice style, like luxurious existence where they're young and they're rich and they're having fun and whatever, inverted by this like terrible tragedy, which is kind of supernatural. And then the fifth one, which is like this kind of strange fantasy romance, which is just really pleasant and beautifully written, and then inverted by this like weird realization that he's kind of been somewhere back in time and the person that he loved doesn't exist anymore. I think that's one thing that I kind of that I was really kind of like hyped on when I was reading that, and I think was maybe probably would have been quite like new for the time as well, this like inverting these start like romantic fiction and stuff. I think one of the things that this suffers from is kind of honestly like a lack of writing about the book as well. But I think we tend to take for granted how much like criticism helps to create canon, and canon helps us to understand like what the main things are about these books. When it comes to Kafka, like if we compare Kafka to this guy, like Kafka's been written about fucking for years now, and in so much depth that even though without that kind of like clarity, I think it might be much more difficult to approach his texts, especially because a lot of them actually aren't that well written, or at least they're not very well structured. in a similar way, if we knew more about Chalmers, and this is partly our own fault for not doing enough research, but if we knew more about Chalmers, and if there was more of like a placement of him within the canon, like what would we, would we be able to think about his stories differently?
Good point. I guess one kind of closing thought for me is that when it comes to these kind of vague, weird stories that aren't super clear in their canon interpretation or whatever, one danger I think we should always avoid is to, like, I don't know, I see this a lot, which is the how should I call it? It's vague, therefore it's deep fallacy.
Right.
So, it's some kind of concept that's not explained, and because it's not explained, it's like, oh, it could be whatever your imagination makes it out to be, and so therefore it gets like mystified or obsessed about, even though there's nothing really there. I'm not saying there's nothing in this book, there definitely is, but
you're kind of pointing towards the idea that there's a certain novelty in like this idea, and it could be cheap in the wrong hands.
Right. Well, there's obviously no way that Chalmers could have written like Act 2 of The King in Yellow actual play. Like, if he did, then this book wouldn't work, right?
Yeah.
Because then you would just read it and go, oh, what, this is it? This is the thing that corrupts everyone?
It's not even scary,
It's not even scary, yeah. The reason why it's scary, or, why it works, is because we don't know. Which is kind of a convenient out, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, not to make this a thing again, but it's kind of like the Marxist utopia, where it's like, the utopia will come to be once it's time.
Right.
We have to tear down all of our, we have to end capitalism, or capitalism has to overcome itself, and then the utopia will arise, and it will be great and awesome. But I can't tell you how exactly it's going to look like, because,
or even how exactly removing these things will produce that.
Yeah. But this kind of, there's something super deep and awesome, but I'm not going to describe it.
Right.
And so therefore now it's credible. I guess it's kind of this similar concept to heaven in Christianity.
Yeah. That's a fair point.
So, yeah, it is the centerpiece of what makes the story work. But it's also a kind of cheap and easy out from a writer's perspective. That, if it's well done, it can be nice. I think it was well done in The Roadside Picnic.
Yeah. I think because it wasn't super central. It was a big part of the story, but there was a lot that was going on, and it was. It also made a lot of sense, and I think gave you enough of an I don't know, like the. I remember one of the analogies that was like written in the book was like something like using a torch as like a hammer or something. Like the idea of using technology in an inappropriate way. These people, they've uncovered these technologies, they have no idea how to use them, but they know that they have this like huge potential.
Yeah.
But the way that they're using them is so wrong. It's as if you were using a torch as a hammer. I think these are short stories as well, which I think you have to give a bit of credit for.
Sure.
But I do, we're going back to these quotes from the beginning. We said where he's got these ideas, but he hasn't developed them. I think.
But the point is, I think if he developed them, they would lose their attraction.
Okay, but I don't. When I say develop, I don't mean like explain what the King in Yellow is, but rather like, I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to say other than just like make it more interesting. Or make it a clearer idea, of a clearer mysterious idea, instead of just this like vague thing which kind of has an effect in some ways, but also maybe doesn't actually have an effect. Like, it's not really clear. Is this person just insane? Is this Plato man real?
But I think this is the point where now we're talking about what could this mean? Is he insane? Is blah blah blah? Whereas if he would be less vague, we probably wouldn't be talking about these stories today.
Maybe, yeah.
They would be,
That's a fair point.
somewhere forgotten in history, maybe. Which, I get why that makes it interesting, but it's also kind of frustrating because it's like, if you just put in less, quote unquote, less work, or if you just leave a lot of shit open for the reader to interpret, now everyone thinks it's deeper than it is.
Yeah, I mean, it would be good for us to read Lovecraft, I think, then, because I mean, it's the same thing, right? Like, horrors beyond your comprehension, which is central to Lovecraft. Like, what is different about Chalmers and Lovecraft? Because obviously they were both closely related.
Yeah.
And this theme of like something that we don't know, something which we can't see as being the source of horror. Like, what makes Lovecraft more memorable? And is there something different between these two? Like, does Lovecraft do the same thing where it's just like, oh, I don't want to describe what Cthulhu looks like because I can't be bothered, or doing so would ruin just ruin this idea? Is it lazy, or is there like something more profound when Lovecraft does it?
That's a good question to ask.
I think one of the main things is that, The King in Yellow is this book which is made, right? We don't know who by, but we know that it's made. We know that it appears in a form, at least we assume that it appears in a form of a real book. But, the monsters from Lovecraft are the, real embodiments of like this other world and this thing that is beyond comprehension. And that is the horror in itself, right? The book itself is not horror. The book itself is not a terrifying object, and it's not beyond our comprehension. But the contents are, right? But I think it's much more. So when I was talking about developing the ideas, maybe a comparison here is important. Is useful. Like, Lovecraft, he does the same thing, right? But the scary thing is that you can't imagine what this thing looks like, and like, because you're being confronted by the limits of your perception as a human being, and you're being confronted with the possibility of this other world existing, which is terrifying. That's what is scary about it, right? And but maybe in The King in Yellow, it's just like, yeah, this is a book, and if you read it, you go crazy, which is not inherently a scary idea, right?
Yeah. It's hard for me to really find a central takeaway. I was thinking about what we just talked about, to strike a parallel in how we discuss religion. I think this is kind of making a detour, but we just read the Genesis book, right? And I think one good way to approach religion is actually to tackle the core ideas and dive into the text and, think about like practical applications or interpretations of these abstract ideas. What really frustrates me is the same like plot device that we find in this book when people say, because God is perfect, you can't like explain it or something like that,
Yeah.
Like, why is going to heaven good? Oh, by definition, that's what it is.
Right. Yeah.
Why is this book corrupting people? No. There is no why. That's just the definition of what it does. Like that's kind of a dead end that frustrates me, and I don't think leads. It definitely works in horror, in the sense that it makes the story creepy. So if you want to write a creepy story, go for it.
You have to have a degree of control of the world.
Yeah, but when we apply it to religion or any more abstract philosophy like Camus or even with the Übermensch in Nietzsche, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Like why is this thing good or we're striving for? I can't explain it. It's just what it is. Like by definition, it's a really frustrating out. That, it just kind of ends this. It doesn't end discussion, but it kind of it spurs the reader on to discuss, to put his own imagination into the text,
Yeah.
because the writer can't explain it, and it annoys me.
I mean, I would probably argue that it's kind of impossible to do that. Like, it's impossible to explain why the Übermensch is good, or why you must imagine Sisyphus happy.
Right.
I feel like, I don't know.
But I
another way-
want that answer.
I know, me too.
I want the answer. And
Then
like,
why we're talking about doing stoicism next? Like, feels like the opposite of it to me.
True. All right, there's a bunch of children coming toward
School trip.
the Eldritch monsters. Okay, should we end it?
Yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up. Good talk.
Good talk. We'll be coming to you next 2 weeks with a mystery book. By which I mean not a mystery novel, but a book which is not decided yet.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Boys. Book boys.